Ex-homeless Redditors, what was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? There is a drainage ditch in my area that the local homeless people tend to bed down in. A few years ago, when I found myself destitute, I spent one night down there. That night I witnessed a Molotov get thrown into another dude's spot, which led to a huge fire that ran rampant through the area. Yeah, I bought a tent the next day and started camping in the local mountains. I was just sleeping where other guys in my city sleep. Then I see some teens stabbing one of the homeless guys multiple times, ran away from there, never turned back. I was staying in a homeless shelter that had a men's side and a woman's side. Most of the men were convicted sex offenders. In the 8 months I spent in that hell on earth, I was friends with 3 women who were raped by some of these men. The truly scary thing, the women were actively discouraged from telling anyone what had happened, especially the police. If they filed a report with the police, they were permanently barred from the shelter. That place, one of the most celebrated in my state, regularly has the mayor and governor drop by, is the most evil place on earth. Edit, the Pine Street Inn, Boston, Massachusetts. I went to college with a guy who was homeless, and he said the amount of women who get raped is just staggering. The police don't care, and the women just have to live with it because there is nothing they can do. He said it was worse with younger girls. Sometimes they would get picked up and would never be seen again. He didn't know if they were killed or just moved off the streets in with someone. Snow. I'm a big scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. In that sense the streets were safe to me, but seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that type of cold and was hoping to be on my feet again before the winter came. Beautiful thing like snow just messed me up in so many ways. Waking up to a shotgun being pointed directly at my head. I wasn't truly homeless, but had no money or bank card and was trying to get back to my parents, following nearly being strangled to death by my ex. The actual fight happened whilst we were out, so I had no spare, no clothes. I'd left my wallet at his place and only had a dying phone on me. I tried getting money for a train, but only really managed enough for a bus fare to the next town, and decided to try hitchhiking. Late into the night, I gave up and managed to sneak into a barn, where I was able to get comfortable enough to sleep. Turns out I didn't close the door enough, and the farmer found me in the morning after taking his gun to investigate. He woke me up. I think he coughed loudly, with the gun pointed at me, and I nearly shat myself. He asked me what I thought I was doing in his barn and quizzed me on how I got in. He asked to see my arms before he lowered the gun and he started chatting. He was quite nice though, and after talking to him for a while, he took me back to his house and fed me, and let me have a shower. Lots of stabbings and rapes. I was stalked by a gang one night on my way home from work. I still have no idea how I wasn't raped or mugged. Once I woke up suddenly to a homeless man, holding a huge knife, staring at me inside the abandoned building's basement I was sleeping in. Once he noticed I was awake, he asked if I was Russian. I said no, and he said he was looking for a different girl, gave me $20 and left. I had been homeless for a couple weeks now, and had made friends with this couple. They seemed pretty chill but had a bit of a drinking problem. Anyway, one night I was sleeping, could hear some commotion going on, couldn't make out who it was or what was going on, until my buddy comes and sits on my sleeping bag, blood pumping out of his neck. Like full on every time his heartbeat it would spurt out. I asked him what happened, and he said he think his missus had cut his throat with a Stanley blade. He was so drunk he was not aware of how bad his injury was, and insisted I did not call an ambulance. So I called the police, they called the ambulance. I see the dude a couple days later, still homeless, scar on his neck. He's ever so grateful the nurse had told him how lucky he was. He was literally a couple millimeters away from dying that night. Edit. I'm no longer homeless. This all happened about 6 years ago now. I no longer speak to him. This is another long story. She was arrested but not charged. Last year she committed suicide, so she's no longer with us. Biggest thing. I'm 5'3", 115 pounds. was how often people try to abduct you. That, and how often people try to serve you tampered food. The teenagers trying to get clout by assaulting or pranking you is another one. I'm a woman in my early 20s. Not my brightest decision, but I slept in my car for several weeks when I was completely out of money. Every night I parked in a small cul-de-sac. As far as I knew, the area was office only, so I didn't take anybody's parking spot, and in the morning I left. I worked a lot, so usually I slept like a log. One night though I woke up, feeling anxious for some reason. I looked up and saw a softly illuminated window right above me. Nice, warm light as if from a bedside lamp. I freaked out a bit and fumbled for my keys. I better sit the rest of the night out at McDonald's or something. Then I noticed a silhouette not far away. A man was standing still and watching me. He didn't knock on my window glass, didn't try to talk or anything. He was just watching. I booked it out of that cul-de-sac real quick. You know, the thing that freaks me out the most is not even the fact that he could assault or rob me then, but the realization that he may have watched me every other night, but I was too tired to notice that earlier. Funny-ish. Guy at the shelter I stayed at got stabbed in the ribs by another guy. The guy who stabbed him just walked inside and attempted to go to sleep, while the guy who got stabbed is sitting on a bench, literally spurting blood out of his side, and he lights a cigarette. When the staff called 911 and tried to help him, he was pushing them off saying he was fine. Horrible. There was a gas station down the street. A guy paid for gas, took the hose and doused himself in gasoline. I was smoking outside, and I remember him walking by outside the yard area with a lighter in his hand, arm fully extended out. He was very mentally ill, so I didn't think anything of it. I couldn't smell gas or anything like that. I continued to smoke, light another one up. About 10 minutes later, I'm inside bullshitting at the front desk, and a dude runs in the front door and shouts, "Give me wet towels." A guy's set himself on fire across the street. Homeless shelters aren't in good areas, so I just walked out, casually thinking some idiot at the apartments across the street had set a rug on fire, and that the dude who ran in was just being a dumbass. I walk out the front door and sure enough, on one of the stairwells there's flames. My thought process was basically, yep, some idiots lit a rug. Oh damn. The rug sat up. Me and 3 other guys ended up being the ones to put him out. He wouldn't though. I don't know if the gas had to burn off first, but probably. I don't really remember putting him out. I just remember after. I don't remember a smell or anything. The morbid thing I do remember is he was out and he just kept shouting, my balls are on fire. Put out my balls." He died 3 days later. I was told it wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. The shelter ended up sending me to therapy, and the woman was the best therapist I'd ever had. I still get weird sometimes, and can't really watch people on fire in movies anymore. I lived in a van for a month or so when I was in college, and would sleep at the park. I didn't necessarily see it, but I heard it, and it is burned into my mind forever. A group of the local hobos beat a guy near to death, and they all raped his girlfriend or wife, then beat her to death. I found a new park after that. Was homeless for a summer and an acquaintance, through the party scene of the town, invited me to crash on her couch. Woke up in the middle of the night to her screaming into her phone about how they are out to get her, and are setting the world up for destruction. Pretended like I was still asleep, and got out of there the next day real quick. A woman giving birth at a bus terminal. Not mine, but a friend of mine works crisis assistance, and showed up to help a mentally ill woman who was in the midst of giving birth, but was swinging a 2x4 at anyone who came near. Bleeding, hostile, and aggressive, and refusing to believe anyone telling her she was having a baby, as it was on the brink of tumbling onto the pavement. I was homeless in Seattle for many years. I've seen some horrible things, ranging from bum fights that ended in one of them dead, to people next to the downtown Macy's, stepping over an overdosed dead body that they thought was just someone sleeping. But the worst thing was probably seeing this methed out drug dealer guy, who at the time, had a bad reputation already on the hill, throw a 15-year-old homeless teen girl over an overpass bridge onto the freeway. She was killed. I was working in a mountain town and couldn't afford rent, even with 2 jobs. left work at 2 AM, walked the hour and a half back to my tent outside of town, while being stalked by a mountain lion. I assume I looked injured and could be an easy meal. It was terrifying. I had a digital camera with me, so I just kept pointing it in the area of the ridge where I could hear it walking, and flashed repeatedly, made it home safe. Another night after closing, different campsite. I must have smelled like a huge gyro after working a double at Pitters in Paradise. Got into my sleeping bag in my tent. I was just about to doze off when I heard big crunches of a black bear sniffing me out. I was frozen with terror. The bear put his snout against the nylon, inches above my head. Hot steam on my face. I had pulled the sleeping bag up to my cheeks petrified when I slapped the bear's nose above my forehead. It was an involuntary reaction and I felt stupid, but I spooked the bear and it took off. I got an apartment with some friends soon after. Not what I saw, what I heard, if that counts. For a while I slept in an empty warehouse. I'm in the UK, so it was a huge Victorian building with about 6 floors. I slept on the 3rd or 4th floor, out of the way of casual intruders. Drunks and prostitutes use that space. And one night I heard a load of shouting and a female screaming from the ground floor. Now I was 16, a junkie and about 120 pounds. So I wasn't in any position to do much, but I crept down the steps to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the place was empty and the noise had stopped, so I went back upstairs. I found out the next day they found a body in the wasteland outside. Turns out the woman was a prostitute. They assumed her client stabbed her after a struggle, and she'd made a run for it before he caught her and finished the job. Always wonder if I'd been able to help, but I'd have probably got stabbed too. Kids beating the shit out of a homeless man. Started with them spitting on him. He gets up and runs after them. Then a couple of them hit him from behind with some piece of wood. He gets mad and they run off. He comes back to the bench and falls asleep again. 10 minutes later they're back, and they just start beating the effing crap out of him. I had to jump in and stop them. In my years being a homeless junkie, and then cleaning up and working at a homeless shelter, I saw a dude try to murder his girlfriend with a machete, like full on swing and barely miss, and my heart was pounding, like I was sure I was about to witness a murder. I also saw countless ODs, saw a girl beaten to shit, who had just been raped asking for help, saw a dude get stabbed, saw a big huge dude have a heart attack and die, and the paramedics frantically trying to give him chest compressions. He was just flopping around. Saw a lot honestly, but those were the ones that come to mind as scaring me the most. I have a million stories from those years, and half sound fake cause they are so ridiculous. After a meal at a local shelter one night, I fell asleep in a park. I hated being around there at night because some of the other homeless would rob you. One guy got knifed a week earlier, so I needed to GTFO. So I started to make my way out of the area taking alleyways, as not to attract the drunks who would throw stuff at, beat up, and generally harass the destitute. I heard a commotion and decided to investigate, and saw this crazy animal of a man, naked from the waist down, on top of someone, I assume a woman, thrusting on top of her. Every couple of seconds he would stop to throw a punch. The woman was unconscious, completely limp, and very bloody. I yelled out to him and he turned to look at me. I have seen a lot of bad things in my life, but the look in his eyes was beyond animalistic. He was filthy, but in the little light from the street lamps, his eyes glowed with rage and insanity. Scared the crap out of me, so afraid that I took off, ran to nearest payphone and dialed 911. I did not go back. I have felt like such a coward, and have no idea what happened to either one. I truly hope she's okay and he is dead. While homeless, before I joined the military, I was sleeping in either an abandoned factory or in my car at the time. While sleeping in the factory, I witnessed someone cracked out of their mind, arguing with someone else cracked out of their mind, arguing over who was going to take the last of the heroin that they had. I watched as someone slit their wrists with a needle, covering themselves in their own blood, saying that they were the sacrificial lamb and deserved to get the last hit. Needless to say, I joined the military a few days later.